What do you remember about your childhood? For me, it was a beautiful time. I felt safe, secure, and invincible, not because I had any reason to be, but because I thought I did. In spite of the many things about the world that I did not know, there were a few things about which I was absolutely certain, and I found comfort in my certainty. I think my top three certainties were these. My grown-ups knew everything. My grown-ups' opinions were always correct, and my grown-ups could always keep me safe. It was a lovely place to be. But if you too are over the age of 7, then you know it doesn't last. Into this black and white picture of childhood enters a grayish character, uncertainty. It first snuck into my little world through a small window in my grandma's house, where I was watching cars drive past on the highway. It occurred to me that there were people in these cars, maybe even people I knew, so I asked, "Grandma, whose car is that?" Her answer knocked the wind out of my certainty. "I don't know." What? How could she not know? It was her job to know. Besides, they were driving on the highway in front of her house. How could she stand not knowing who was in every car? I challenged her answer. "I thought you knew everything." "No," she said rather bluntly. "No one can know everything." Well, this was shocking news. I made my peace with it because I figured that even if my grown-ups didn't know everything, at least they knew the things that mattered. That reassured me. For example, they knew all about the names and places and stuff on the evening news. None of it made sense to me, but I could tell they really cared. In fact, they had strong feelings. I was relieved to know that my very smart grown-ups knew which people were on the correct side of things, and I decided to show them that I was right there with them. So one day, I told my grandma exactly what I had heard my daddy say about a man named Ronald Reagan. And for good measure, I also parroted his opinions about another man named Jimmy Carter. My grandma froze at her kitchen sink. Her face became tight, and through clenched teeth, she expressed a contradictory opinion, and there died another of my precious certainties. The idea that my grown-ups all had the same, equally correct opinion about the world. How distressing. How could two people who were both always right disagree? Well, the final and most terrifying blow to my certainties came one dark, chilly Wednesday evening. I had been at the church across the highway from my grandma's house for an evening children's ministry, and for some reason, no one was there to pick me up when it ended, so I walked across the highway and down the very long, very dark driveway to my grandma's house. I have no idea who let a 7-year-old do this thing, but I am pleased to tell you, I made it across the highway and down that long, dark driveway in one piece. However, when I got to the house and let myself into the garage, the interior house door was locked. I knocked, but no one came. I was terrified. Where were my people? Why was I alone in a cold, dark garage? How long would I be there? Were they dead? Or had they forgotten about me? I huddled against the door, making myself very small and trying not to cry. Eventually they came home, surprised to find me in the cold, dark garage, and understandably a bit upset about the whole situation, but no one was more upset than I. I had thought that my people would always be exactly where they needed to be for me, and they weren't. It seemed like the world was not such a safe place after all. The fairy tale had taken that turn where the kid realizes that the world is bigger than the sweet shelter of the sunny garden, as she finds herself deep within the dark wood of uncertainty. We all get there eventually, and it's not just a one-time lesson of our childhood. Through our lives, we find our certainties challenged in our education, in our work, in our parenting, even in our faith. The Apostle Paul acknowledged this in his letter to the brand new first century church in Corinth, probably echoing uncertainties he knew the congregants had as spiritual infants new to the faith. They may have wondered, do I know enough? Am I doing this right? Uh-oh, the person next to me seems to have a better understanding of how this whole religion thing works. Will anyone figure out that I don't really get it? That I have doubts? That I can neither speak in tongues nor prophesy to save my life? Well, to anyone struggling with such uncertainties, Pastor Paul offers these words. As for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. What a relief. Even the pastor of that very early Christian church could admit that this faith thing is complicated. We might think that people living in biblical times didn't have the same challenges as we do. After all, they were so close to the events we can only learn about in ancient stories. Wasn't it easier to understand then? Apparently not. Paul himself admits that we know only in part. He says it's like seeing in a mirror dimly. We need not be ashamed of our uncertainty. In fact, it may very well be a gift. When we can let go of our need to feel so certain about things, we can cultivate a mindset of curiosity. And curiosity is what will lead us to know fully, to use Paul's words. I sometimes wonder, does know fully mean to know everything, or does it mean to know that you don't know everything? Either way, curiosity will at least help us to know more fully. Curiosity leads us to ask questions, lots of questions, better and better questions. And as you know, if you have spent more than 1 minute with any child, there are oh so many questions. And do we, the adults in the room, say, just be content to know nothing and accept that the sky is blue, and who on earth cares why? Great blue heavens, no. Those questions are golden. It is how children grow to become scientists, explorers, builders, artists, healers, teachers, even theologians. When we encourage children to be curious, they can become comfortable with uncertainty, testing their ideas and letting them grow. And it need not end in childhood. Like the new adult members of the first century church in Corinth, we all find ourselves at different places of certainty, whether we've been in church for 60 years or 60 minutes. We just heard Paul say, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. My friends, I do not think this is a criticism of curiosity or uncertainty. You see, when Paul was in his spiritual childhood, that is, before he knew Christ, his most problematic behavior was his certainty. He was very certain that he had all the answers, and he was so convinced of it that he hunted down followers of Jesus because he considered their beliefs and actions to be heretical. He did not understand because he was locked in his own certainty about how true faith should look. There were rules and laws, and these people did not seem to be following them. But when Paul allowed his hardened heart to be broken by a love so great that it pursued him in order to draw him close, even as he pursued Christians in order to kill them, he put an end to his childish ways. And he did that most mature thing. He admitted that he did not know everything, that no one could know everything, and he allowed himself to learn. He recognized his own brokenness and sought healing. He spent some time in the dark woods of uncertainty and learned how to survive there. Actually, he learned to thrive. All through Paul's life, he wrote letters to the various churches he founded, and if we were to read those letters carefully and in chronological order of having been written, we would notice something. Paul's theology, his understanding of his faith, it does change some over time. He did not let certainty stunt his spiritual growth. Uncertainty is what helps us all to grow. Those moments of my childhood that shook things up, they've given me the best lessons for how to live a fuller life. Realizing that my grandma didn't know every driver and every car opened my eyes to the infinite wonder of this world, and I love it all the more for its mysteries. Knowing that two people I love and admire can disagree with each other, even about Reagan and Carter, has taught me that we all have permission to think for ourselves and to love others who think differently. And even that terrifying moment in the garage taught me that while being alone in the dark was definitely not the end of the world, it was also an avoidable situation. I realized that while it wasn't entirely my fault, I had played a role and I could have been a little smarter than to walk home in the dark. I learned a little bit about personal responsibility that night. Ultimately, my journey into the dark woods of uncertainty has opened my life up to a richness that is nourishing and life-giving. Uncertainty is uncomfortable and even scary, but locking down on our convictions is limiting, sometimes even deadly. Do you know the story of the beggar of Bethesda? This story is told in the 5th chapter of John's Gospel, and it goes something like this. There's this pool of water called Bethesda, and the people go there to be healed because apparently an angel shows up now and then and stirs the water, and that's the magical moment. The thing is, the healing is limited to one person each time this happens, so you gotta wait your turn. So people would sit there all day, every day, waiting their turn. And while they wait, they beg because they're too sick to work, right? Healing just cannot come soon enough. So there's this one guy who's been there for 38 years, waiting his turn. But then Jesus shows up and he asks him, "Do you want to be made well?" And the guy doesn't say yes and he doesn't say no. Instead, he starts making excuses for why he couldn't get into the healing water. No one will help me get in. Someone always gets there first, whatever. 38 years of excuses. And Jesus says, "Pick up your mat and walk." And the man walks away just like that. 38 years of certainty. And what did it gain him? 38 lost, wasted years that could have been spent learning a trade, helping others, making art, anything but sitting there day after day, crippled by his own certainty that there was no other way for him to live. Did he even want to be made well? What about us? Are there certainties in our lives that are holding us back? What might we dare to dream if we quit telling ourselves, "There's no way it will happen"? Maybe there is a chance to mend that relationship. Maybe it is possible to change that one habit. Maybe we can bring ourselves to forgive that person. If only we could bring ourselves to recognize we don't have to be so certain about everything. Welcome to the dark woods, my friends, where we claim uncertainty as a gift. I would like to share with you a blessing that I find to be a gift. It's written by Kate Bowler and Jessica Ritchie in their beautiful book, The Lives We Actually Have, 100 Blessings for Imperfect Days. And this is a blessing for the gift of doubt. They start it with a quote from Thomas Merton, which I will read to you. "My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you." Here's the blessing. "I long for understanding, but life is full of unanswered questions. Oh God, reveal to me what I need to know now. And as for the rest, teach me how to live with so much uncertainty. Blessed are we who come to you in the discomfort of our doubt, for we trust that our honest unknowing is a truer and better prayer than bootstrapping efforts at certainty. Blessed are we receiving the gift of doubt, for we trust that it is a doorway, freeing us to become all that we could not otherwise have known. Blessed are we remembering that you hold all things together. You are the invisible scaffolding that supports us, the canopy of love that covers us in the present, the stable pillars sunk deep into our past, and the sparrow that flies confidently toward the future, bearing for us the peace we could never have attained for ourselves. Blessed are we, settling into the truth that there are things we cannot know, settling into the humility that knows this one thing, that we are of the earth, while you bear up the universe." And I could end it there, but they did give one more quote, which I just have to share with you. This is a short one from Voltaire. "Doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is absurd." May you find blessing in your uncertainty.